Welcome. This is a special meeting of the Kent School District Board, which is held in public to comply with the Open Public Meetings Act. The purpose of this special meeting is a work session for a financial forecast presentation. I do apologize to our online watchers too. We are a little delayed in getting started, but thank you for letting us get a quorum. First, I will call a roll call of the board members. At this time, I'll take roll call for attendance. I'll call each board member's name, and if they're present, they will say present. Attending virtually, Director Song.
Present.
Director Cook. Director Cook is absent. Director Clark.
Present.
Also attending virtually, Vice President Farah, who's also currently marked absent. And I am present. First, I'd like to call upon Superintendent Vela to kick us off for our financial forecast.
Thank you, President Margell. We're excited to come to you this evening to share with you our financial forecast. I'm going to go ahead and turn over to Mr. Raul Paranguao, Executive Director of Finance, to begin our presentation.
President Margell, member of the board, Superintendent Vela, and Ms. Curry, good evening. Tonight, I'll be presenting to you the financial forecast. And next to me here is Ms. Lisa Tyler, our Director of Budget, and we will be answering questions after the presentation is done. So before we go into the forecast, I'd like to share with you some information about the most recent fiscal year that just ended and how we did. And then we're going to go on to the forecast. And so in this slide, you will see 23-24 and the adopted budget column. You will see the revenues and the expenditures. In August of 2023, we projected that we will experience a 7.22 million of deficit. With a beginning balance of 63 million, the projected ending balance for 23-24 was 55.9 million, and then an estimated designation of 11 million leaves us with about 45 million or 44.8 million of unassigned ending fund balance, which is equivalent to 9%. Now, that 9% is very important because there is a board policy 6022 that requires us to maintain an unassigned ending fund balance of 5%. And so you could see that we were projecting above the 5%. So when we closed the books and we looked at the actual revenues and expenditure, you see that we generated 525 million in revenues and 518 million in expenditures. But instead of a deficit, we ended with a surplus of about 6.7 million. And later on, I'll explain the reason why we experienced that. And with the beginning balance of 63 million, our ending fund balance is actually at 69.8 million. Now, the designation is higher than what anticipated at 39.8 million. And that was because at the time that we certified this report, we were not sure yet whether we're going to pass the levy or not. And so as we have communicated in this venue and also to our community that if the levy fails, we will use our general fund towards those emergent needs. And so we set aside $26.5 million at that point, and that was early part of November when we did it, prior to the certification of the 2024 levy. And so with that, we resulted with about $30 million unassigned ending balance, which is about 6.1%, still above the 5%. Now, when you look at the variances, you would see that the revenue is higher by $1.5 million than what we anticipated. And that was mainly because we received additional funding for special education, specifically the safety net. And those amounts, you don't get to determine that ahead of time and until such time that you file the claim. And even until such time that the state tell us how much they're going to give us. You don't know exactly what you're going to get. And so in the end, we ended up getting more than what we anticipated, and that's why we have 1.5 million extra. Now, in the expenditure, you notice that we're 2.3% less than the budgeted amount, and that is mainly due to the savings in the employee benefits. Again, similar situation when we adopted the budget, when we presented them in August 2023, the state gave us a certain rate, but those were not final. And so the final happened right after the board adopted them, and so therefore we ended up saving some, which is a good thing. And then there are some carryover unspent categorical funds, specifically LAP funds and also CTE. And so those were unspent money that we rolled over into the next year. And so overall, our ending fund balance grew by about 14 million than anticipated, which is a good thing. It's actually, it sets the stage in terms of what we're going to do in the out years. When we look at the, oops, come on, move. There you go. When we look at the five-year history, here you would see all the revenues and expenditure for the last 5 years. And then also included are the surplus and deficit for the last 5 years. And you notice here, the 3 years out of the last 5, we were experiencing surplus, and then 2 years were deficit. One thing to note in the historical view is that during that time, we were also getting ESSER funds. And later on, you're going to see the chart in terms of how much ESSER we got year by year. And so we were able to maintain a pretty healthy ending fund balance throughout those years, very steady, very stable, including our unassigned ending fund balance at about, between $49.9 million and $30 million, still above the board policy 6022. When we look at our trending for our revenues and expenditure, you look at the revenues are increasing at an average of about 5.7% every year, which is approximately about 25 million. And again, it's because we are getting about, in the last 5 years, we got about $95 million of ESSER funding. And later on, I'll show you the schedule in terms of the year-by-year revenue for ESSER. However, our expenditures have experienced about 7.4% increase on the average per year, which is about $31 million. And they're mainly due to the increasing cost of doing business, including salary increases and also additional costs due to the pandemic. Now, when you look at those percentages, you would see the imbalance between the two. Revenue is increasing at 5, expenditure is increasing at 7, and therefore, you will notice that we are actually spending more than what we're bringing in on a year-by-year basis. When we look at the ending fund balance, you see how steady they are. The blue bar represents the unassigned ending fund balance. And again, the green below that is the designation or what we call the assignment. And notice that in 23-24, that amount is larger, and that is because of the uncertainty of the passing of the levy at that point when we certify them. Now, if we knew at that time that we don't need to designate 26.5 million, obviously the blue would be bigger. And that percent, when you look at the line chart, we said 6.1% in unassigned. That should have been 11% if we did not have to set aside the amount for the cap and tax levy. So the ESSER funds, these are the year-by-year revenue for the ESSER. And you would see that the first 2 years were low, but in the last 3 years, we've been getting approximately 30 million every year, a total over the 5-year period of about close to 95 million from the general fund, and then there's another 5 million that is used for capital projects. And then on the pie chart, you would see the uses of those ESSER funds. The biggest portion that we used ESSER funds for was the continuity of operation. And what that is that the federal government gave us the money in order for us to maintain the level of staffing, even though our enrollment was dropping. And you would see the enrollment trend in the succeeding slide. And so even though we experienced a big drop in enrollment, the federal government says, keep your people and use the ESSER funds to maintain them. And that's the green portion of them, which is continuity of operation. since the ESSER is no longer available in 24-25, we were able to maintain some of those positions that was previously funded by ESSER. For example, our instructional coaches were actually, we continue to maintain them in 24-25, but we use a different source of funding, like carryover of Title I and carryover of Title III, but that is only for 1 year. And those are, we will need to make decisions in the 25-26 for those positions. So when we develop the forecasts are made up of mainly assumptions. And of course, the biggest part of the forecast is the enrollment. And so it's important to really look at what is the enrollment trend. And so you would see here that up until the pre-pandemic, our enrollment is actually at a pretty high rate. And as soon as the pandemic hits, you would see that it dropped quite significantly. And what we noticed is that we have not really recovered from it. It went up by a little bit and stayed flat all the way through, including our projection. And so in terms of numbers, you would see that the enrollment has declined by 8.7%, or about 2,308 students in the last 10 years. And most of them are the decline that happened during the pandemic. Enrollment, as I mentioned, has not really recovered from the pre-pandemic, and the projection for the next 4 years is showing that the enrollment would be flat. Another assumptions that we use is the implicit price deflator, or what we commonly known as cost of living adjustment, or COLA. And these numbers are going to change, or potentially are going to change, depending on what the legislators would tell us. But based on what we know now, these are the rates that we use in projecting our financial. That includes all the basic allocation per FTE at 11,600 all the way to 12,300. And when we look at the class sizes, these are also assumptions. This is not yet engraved in stone, because we are still going to look at the succeeding slides in terms of what type of financials do we have in the current and in the next 4 years. One of the things that very frequently get forgotten is the step in column adjustment. So when we look at our salary schedules, every employee move into the scale, and that's what we call the step increase. And then if they submit additional credentials, they may be moving in the column. And that's why when we study what the value of the step in column adjustment year by year, that's about 1.25%. And so we need to factor that in, because those are natural costs that's going to occur year by year. And so additionally, any one-time revenues and expenditures are not included in the projected year. So meaning if we receive a one-time revenue and we spend them all today, we're not projecting them in the out years unless there is a known item, meaning like the state would say, we will give you one-time funds for a particular year. But otherwise, we don't budget for any one-time revenues and expenditures. Resulting from all of that assumption is this forecast. And so you would see all the projected revenues and expenditure starting from the current year all the way to the next 4 years. And just like to focus our attention on the third line, which is the surplus and deficit. And so people already said that we're going to be experiencing a deficit of about 9.7 million in 24-25. And then in these succeeding years, the deficit is continuing on all the way to about $18.2 million deficit up in 28-29. And as a result of that, if you look at the ending fund balance, you notice that it's draining quite rapidly and all the way through a 0.8%. Now, at that point, we need to compare that to our board policy 6022, and then definitely we are dropping way below the board policy. And so it is really important to look at it so that then we could rectify or figure out some budget balancing solutions. And then in the last slide right here, I just want to share with you some of my key takeaways as I was developing this forecast. So the first one is that we know that enrollment has not recovered from the pre-pandemic, and it is projected to be flat. Now, I think the nature of enrollment is that when you lose student, when you're on a decline, you lose your revenues faster than your expenditure. As an example, if we lose 10 students, we lose 100,000, more or less $100,000. But we don't necessarily able to reduce our expenditure because those reduction in student might be coming from 10 different buildings, right? And so you're not able, so you lost 100,000, but you are not able to reduce your expenditure. Even at 100 students, if I lost 100 students and those are coming from 42 schools, it is probably likely that we're not going to be able to reduce our expenditures. But 100 students reduction means about $1 million loss in revenue. And so that is just the nature of enrollment. Now, conversely, if we are on an upswing, if we are gaining enrollment, we would actually gain revenue faster than we could lose our expenditures. And so same effect, we gain $1 million of revenue in my example, but we don't necessarily need to add more people because we might be able to fill in some of the empty seats. Second takeaway was that state funding is not catching up with the increasing cost of doing business, and thus resulting in a budget deficit. So for example, in some of the previous slide, I mentioned that an automatic expense of 1.25% is for step and column increases. Those are contractual obligations. And if our IPD or COLA is 1.9, we've already spent down 1.25. And so then now we have about less than 1% left, but yet we still think about our labor negotiation. How much salary increases will we be providing? But the other part of that is just the normal course of doing business. Like, for example, utilities. Utilities, if we have not shared it in this venue, have been increasing at about 13% yearly. Our insurance has increased quite a bit this year. And so all of those, if you combine them all together, adds up, and yet the state is not giving us sufficient funds to be able to cover all of that. And then I mentioned about the ESSER funds that have been claimed. All of that has been claimed, and no new one-time money is in the horizon. And then federal funds may be at risk of reduction. We've been hearing from some of our professional organizations sharing with us some of the initiatives that are coming our way at the tune of sometimes even removing an entire program. And in some cases, 25% reduction in federal funding. And so there is a direct negative impact to our district and also in general in education. The continuous structural deficit in the current and projected years, which will drain the ending fund balance. We need to rectify that. And then we need to implement budget balancing solutions. And I think I shared it here in last August. Some of the strategies we will be using would be starting with efficiencies. What are the things that we could do in the district to make things more efficient? Because the amount of work are growing, but we don't have enough resources to be able to address them, or we don't have resources to add more people. And so the only way that we could do it is to figure out a way to be more efficient. Then revenue enhancement is another one as a second item. And the third is expenditure reduction, or a combination of all of them in order to avoid a drastic reduction in ending fund balance. Just perspective, our operating cost per month is about $45 million. So any given month, we're spending $45 million. A 5% minimum ending fund balance represents about 2.6 weeks of operation. Now, it is our recommendation that at some point we need to increase the policy to a minimum of 10%, which is equivalent to about $52 million, to cover at least 1 month of operating costs. And I'd like to comment, actually, based on our discussion with our auditors. The auditors actually are asking or telling us that the ideal level of reserve is 60 days of operation, which is equivalent to about 16.5%. Now, it's the ideal, and they're not saying you must be there, but then a good measure is 16.5. And so where we're at right now, 5%, our recommendation is 10, the auditor is saying 16.5. So we just need to keep that in mind in terms of, as we implement budget balancing solution, what can we do to be able to at least maintain a full month of undesignated fund balance. And that concludes my presentation. I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have soon.
Director Clark.
Yeah. So one of my problems, obviously, is projected enrollment. And we have at least the basis of the students that are young and will be with us the following series of years. But my first question would be, is there any reason to believe there'll be an increase in employment in the Kent School District in 3 years that would account for at least a stabilization of that student population? Because the flip side of that is, if you're barely hanging on right now and the employment situation is insecure, then you go where the jobs are.
Can I clarify to make sure I understand the question? Are you talking about the employment within the district
No.
itself or within the community that supports the district?
Within the community. 'Cause
Thank you.
I'm-
Okay, that's
yeah,
what I thought you meant, but I want to make sure.
yeah.
Well, so I think those are one of the indications of a potential increase in population, but at the same time, based on my experience, just because the employment is growing, the people who are coming into our district or into our community may be those who didn't have any children, or still have younger children that maybe in a few years will be in our system. And so I think this is the reason why I think Ms. Tyler here has been monitoring the birth rate very carefully, and compared to the number of students who came to our system after 5 years. And I think, I forgot what the average number, the average entry point versus the birth rate. Is it 70%? I think 78%?
Oh,
72%.
okay, so if you track, is this on? If you track the total births in the county, in King County, historically, Kent School District receives less than 8%. It's running about 7.5 to 7.8% of all county births. You know, we've shown over the years it's pretty stable at that 7.5 to less than 8%. So, but there's no data that indicates that birth rates are going to start increasing. I mean, they're just declining. People are not having kids. And that's not only here, that's nationwide. You know, you can look at the data all across the country. Birth rates are down. Even, actually, I was listening to the radio yesterday, worldwide, birth rates are down. And so, you know, there really isn't any justification for me to assume kindergarten enrollments are going to start increasing. I did, however, in my projections for 25, 26, I did get a little less conservative and I bumped them up slightly, you know, maybe being a little bit hopeful, because we did come in a little higher than our projections in this current year. So I'm thinking, okay, I feel comfortable bumping my numbers up a little bit. That they're not material, so it's not, you know, we're not going to see a huge increase in our kindergarten class. So it's really, you know, I think all the evidence shows flat for now.
I think another measure that we will be looking at, and we started doing this work right now, is identifying our student generation rate, depending on the type of housing development that are happening around us. When you see a lot of multifamily homes, those don't attract more children. And so if there are many single-family homes, generally you have a higher generation rate on a single-family home. But on a multifamily, it's a small fraction based on our study. And so we will be updating that study again to see if we are seeing some signs that they are going to grow in the future. But at this time, there is no indication that that is the case.
If I may, I wanted to add, Director Clark, from the state perspective for birth rate, what we've heard from our state superintendent is that plan for over the next 10 years statewide for numbers continuing to drop across the state. I would, just wanted to add that I've shared that before in different settings, but I wanted to just point that out.
Thank you.
And if I can still speculate here, in the old days, it was housing units that we were able to predict the growth. And clearly, growth management took away that spiral of growth. And then, of course, as property values exploded because there weren't the units, then it became more difficult for families to establish a residence with a used home because they just weren't available. So when I ask that question about employment, I'm just trying to bring into focus all right, again, just statistically, obviously, there are more Amazon employees than retail clerks now in King County. Now, the reason I use that is they would represent people that are likely to have decent incomes, but they may not have kids or are planning a small family. And so the trap becomes, if they do come to work here and they're making more money, they create an increasing demand for services. And that creates a basis for households that are holding on as Junior finally becomes, a graduate and can start bringing money into the household. But if in effect there is no employment growth, and again, I'm not taking Seattle specifically, but South King County, it would tend, for me, would run a red flag for even a stabilization of student population. I'm just making that observation.
So to that end, I also would like to add that the interest rate, whether we like it or not, may have something to do with it. Because when the interest rate is high, the turnover of houses are fewer. People would like to sell, but there are few people who want to buy. Thus, those students, the high school student who graduated and who would like to sell their homes, may not be able to sell their houses, and therefore there is no turnover of houses. And so the ideal situation is if people are able to sell their homes and the new residents coming are those with younger children, that brings in more students for us. But because of the interest rate, it becomes so prohibitive for them to be able to turn over the houses. And so again, another data point would be to look at some of the real estate sales and who's selling, who's buying.
Yeah.
So.
Thank you very much. Director Song?
Right. Yeah, I would also comment that, I mean, when we look at the data and statistics right now, just because there's an increase in the job market doesn't necessarily equate to that also bringing in additional residents to that area. Using Seattle, for example, there are many job openings, but there are less people moving into the Seattle area. So to make those financial projections based off of the aspirations that because we have a job market growth, that's going to equate to additional residents moving in, I think is something that should be tracked. I'd be curious to see if we can gather some of that data from the Department of Commerce to actually see if there's existing projections that are already made.
Yeah, I think the closest that I could think of would be what I mentioned about the study of the student generation rate. And I think we're going to be starting to engage a contractor to be able to perform that study for us. It is also part of our facilities plan for us to do that. And we'll look forward into the outcome of that, see if there's any changes in the student generation rate.
But the other question that I had was, I like the proactive approach about kind of these solutions to our budget with increasing, or I guess amending our board policy so that we can increase from the 5% to either 10 to 16, but that still gives us a gap in assuming or projecting where we're going to gain additional revenue. So although it's a short-term solution to have, say, 2 to 3 months of operating costs at hand, what's the long-term solutions or what's the current plans or projections for increasing the revenue with the decrease in funding?
And that is very true. And one of the things that also probably worth sharing is, and I want to take this moment to thank our community for really supporting our EP&O levy. We generate over $80 million, or roughly about $80 million in EP&O levy. But every year we perform the calculation, how much really is an unfunded amount in the district, in Kent School District? And I could tell you that the unfunded amount is over $100 million. And so when you talk about how can we raise revenue, we could certainly look at a lot of different things in the district in terms of bringing more revenue, including maybe soliciting more grants and things like that. But the gap is so big. And so the state really needs to come up with a solution to be able to address that gap. We could certainly try every effort in order for us to make a difference or add additional revenue, but I'm afraid that it's really hard to make a dent when the gap is that big. And one of the other things that worth noting that I didn't mention earlier, we just found out after this forecast was prepared, was that our free and reduced lunch have been dropping. And by a significant number. I think it was near about 10%. It was over 50% a year before, and now we're at about 41%. So nearly about 10% reduction. The direct impact to our budget is the reduction, a potential reduction in LAP funding. And so they're behind by a year, meaning like when they give us the funding for 25-26, they use the 24-25 rate. We don't realize them now, but we're going to realize the loss of funding in 25-26. And like I said, we just discovered that after I finished the forecast, and so that would be included in our next version of them.
And I wanted to add, Director Song, that the other piece of the revenue you just heard, over $100 million that we do not receive from the state, is what we're continually pushing at the legislative level, and that is the ask to fully fund special education to the tune of $24 million that we spend and continuing to rise each year, MSOC and transportation. And that is an effort to our boards that is statewide. They call it the 3 buckets, that even that would help our general fund as well.
Thank you. Yeah, I think just my only hesitation is with the uncertainty with the Department of Ed and the funding and us just entering this legislative period to amend the board policy to increase the ending balance. It just doesn't seem like we have a good contingency plan put in place.
And if you're okay with this, Director Song, I want to continue asking questions on that section 2. So what's the worst that happens? Can you talk? I mean, so we went through a pandemic, and we didn't have a 10%. And a lot of people would argue that that's maybe the worst that could happen, right? We didn't have school for a huge amount of time. Mm-hmm. And then also, if the really, really worst happens, is it going to matter if we have 2.5 weeks or 4 weeks?
Well, it does matter because we need to be able to pay our people. We have contractual obligations. And so that's why it is really important for us to have at least a month of undesignated ending fund balance. Now, you probably heard a number of districts who are currently in trouble or at the brink of getting in trouble. I think the big difference between Kent School District and a few others is that some of them are not really looking at it prospectively like we do. So if you look at the way we do it, this is not even required by the state. But it's really important for us to be able to stay in front of them so that we could guide our steps in the future. And if you don't do the forecast and you're making decision today, and you're using one-time money, such as the ending fund balance, because ending fund balance is one-time money. If you're using one-time money for ongoing expenditures, that is a formula for a binding condition. And so to answer your question, I think it matters for us to be able to maintain a reasonable amount of ending fund balance, because regardless of what the state would do, we still have contractual obligation to our people.
I kind of pushed on it, but I'm also guessing that there's an impact that it has onto bond ratings. You know, you were talking about interest rates and the impact that interest rates have on a community, on a country. And I'm guessing that our fund balance has an impact on that. So could you maybe expand a little bit on that?
So what we're doing today is something that the bond rating companies such as Moody's and Standard & Poor's love. They love to see us staying in front of it. And they love to see us rectifying it, even more so when we come up with a budget balancing solution. For example, what you see tonight in terms of those deficits, when we look at this and say, what could be a potential solution? These are all red, and seems like they're a large number and very difficult to solve. But one thing to remember is, let's just say, just an example, and I'm not saying that this is going to be our final solution, but when you think about $1 million improvement, let's say 25, 26, we are seeing about 6.5 million deficit. If we're able to knock it off by, let's say, $2 million, and for some reason or another, we did some efficiencies and we were able to garner a savings of $2 million. See, that $2 million has $8 million effect all the way through, because those are ongoing solutions. And that's why immediately you gain $8 million. The year after that, because we have other strategies that we're looking at, we're studying all our operation to make things more efficient. Let's say we garner another $3 million in 26, 27. That is a $9 million effect all the way through. So when you mention about credit rating and things like that, these are the things that they're looking at. Say, how proactive are you? And so at this very early stage that we're able to identify this, they love this. Even more so, and they say, and what solution are you coming up? And so once we are able to demonstrate that we're coming up with this solution, like a 3-year plan on how we're going to solve this, they would actually look at us in a more positive way, that we are demonstrating good management, financial management, and that we will remain solvent. If you add another layer to it, like if we're able to garner a 10% ending fund balance, even the more reason for the Moody's and Standard & Poor's to be able to see us preferably.
Director Clark, any additional questions?
Just some comments from the past. Way back when Dr. Vargas was the superintendent, we made the move to adopt a 10% thing. And I was perfectly in line with that because I had just come from the Kent City Council, and they also, as a public institution, aimed at a 10% ending balance. The trap that I see at this point in time is the revenue flow from the sources that we are dependent from, the two biggest being the state and the feds. And grimly, I can't see the feds warming up to us, such as paying the 40% for special ed that they put into the original funding bill and never met. But the trap is the state right now currently is truly struggling with the deficit. And so I see us trying to reach a stage of hold harmless as much as possible. But my problem with immediately jumping to a 10% funding balance is, given the revenue flow at this point, that could be serious labor problems in a hurry. And so I want to be responsible, and I would love to be at 10% because that's what you do in normal times, but I just can't bring myself to that level at this point in time. Now, I don't disagree with your observation that we have to demonstrate that we're making some progress, but I'm just saying I'm not at 10%.
Well, some consideration that we could do is to set that as a goal. And we could set a target and say, by this date, we should be able to maintain a 10%. We could work towards that. Not a guarantee, because then we don't control what the federal and the state are going to do. You mentioned about the state deficit. You know, they just mentioned $10 billion. We don't know yet. It's not yet factored in this forecast in terms of what the $10 billion will affect us. We don't know which agency in the state are going to be affected. But based on what the superintendent mentioned about the projection from the state about the shrinking student population, I could just imagine that education will be somewhat impacted by the $10 billion. But to your point, I think the key to be able to build that reserve or the undesignated ending fund balance to 10% is a revenue infusion. Now, it would be good if we are able to get some type of a one-time infusion or one-time revenue, similar to what we got during the pandemic. We have ESSER. That would have been a perfect time for us to be able to build our reserve to a 10%, because those are, or undesignated ending fund balance is a one-time money, and it could also be addressed by a one-time revenue infusion.
Thank you. Director Song?
So when you use the term revenue infusion, are you asking for more like a stimulus type approach where we're approving a one-time 10% increase? Or were you alluding to kind of keeping it at this 10% until there's, I guess, more stability in place to revert back to the 5%?
So when I say revenue infusion, I mean one-time funding coming from whatever sources. It could be the federal or it could be the state. And because the function of increasing the undesignated ending fund balance is either increasing revenue or reducing more expenditure, or a combination of the two. That would actually lead us into the 10%. Now, as you could see right here, even staying at 5%, we would need to make some solution, budget balancing solutions. If we were to set the goal to a 10%, we need to increase that amount of the budget balancing solution to be able to get to a 10%.
Okay, thank you.
When would we expect to see what that looks like? I mean, everything's easy when it's just numbers on a piece of paper, right? But when we start saying, okay, so we're already short, we need to have more to cover the short,
Yep.
and either more revenue or decreased expenses. And we're not seeing the additional revenue, so then it's increased or decreased expenditures. And we want to increase our fund balance over this amount of time. When would we expect to start seeing what that actually looks like pen to paper and the impact on what the programming and the impact to our district would look like.
So I think we get information about the budget, state budget, like right around January, February? March. So right around March, we will recalibrate this, or maybe even before that. As I mentioned, that we discovered about the free and reduced lunch rate. We will recalibrate this one more time, and it's not gonna look any better than this, that next revision. But in March is when we're going to get some preliminary estimate from the state. How are we gonna be impacted by the new state budget? And what would the federal funds would look like? Then we'll recalibrate this again and come back to you. At that point, we might be able to start, or maybe at least some preliminary draft of what the expenditure reduction might look like, and how much, and then we will incorporate them into the forecast, and that would be sometime in March.
Yep. And is it also something that we can ask for from the administration of what are we doing to be able to capture the free and reduced? I mean, as I'm assuming, and this is a big assumption, it goes back to, what's in it for me? And for many parents, if your child's getting lunches paid for because everybody, we work to make sure that everybody has that. If your child doesn't play sports or the sports that they're playing don't have a fee associated to them, and so anything that you're doing, there's no cost anyway, why fill out the paperwork?
Yeah, and perhaps Faith could actually share some of the things that we are already doing in order to recapture some of that, so.
Okay, I wasn't going to put you on the spot to answer that today, so, but if you're willing to, that'd be great.
So we met this week, a group of us, to really look at this problem. And we really, in my opinion, the free lunch, as you said, for entire district overshadowed the messaging of you need to still apply. So we're going to revamp our messaging to kind of bring that forward, because yes, it pays for fees, but also more than messaging that it will help your school. It will help fund your school resources. And so we're going to use a different take on the messaging and then put out a big push in January. So,
I mean, I would also say that that's kind of the same messaging that we have with levies, and it took a few times through to get that one passed. We had a great passage. But I think in the world of competing things for every single moment of every single day, for every single person, filling out a form that doesn't feel like it actually helps your child, I could see that being a hard message to get out. And so
it does automatically qualify families for Sunbucks, which is your summer EBT program. And so that's another thing that we're going to push out there as well, so that families understand it automatically qualifies when they complete this paperwork. So there's some things we're looking at. And again, I think we always do a big push in the fall and then in January, February. And so we're still going to do that. We're just going to tweak our messaging, and hopefully that'll bring the numbers up.
okay, and I know it's 6 o'clock, so I have just a quick question. The application, is parents would find that where?
Online under nutrition services.
Okay, great.
But I think Superintendent Vela has it in his report tonight as well, to encourage parents to complete it.
Fantastic, great. Okay, it is 6 p.m. and we are now going into executive session for 30 minutes. The purpose of this executive session is to discuss the performance of a public employee, potential litigation, and the legal or financial risks of a course of action. Good evening. It is now 6:30 and our executive session adjourned at 6:24 PM. Being 6:30, that I call our regular meeting to order. We will first start with our roll call of board members. At this time, the board will take a roll call for attendance. I will call each board member's name, and if they are present, they will say present. Director Song,
Present.
Director Cook,
Present.
Director Clark,
Present.
Vice President Farah,
Present.
and myself. I do ask that our board members, just for ease of us being able to see, if it is possible to have a camera on, it does help us when you're remote. Director Cook, would you mind helping us say the Pledge of Allegiance?
Of course. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Welcome. This is a meeting of the Kent School District Board, which is held in public to comply with the Open Public Meetings Act. We welcome the public's participation in this board meeting and thank those of you who have come to the meeting and those who are viewing via our live stream. The purpose of a board meeting is for the board to conduct its business in public. During the meeting, the board will listen to but not respond to comments from visitors. Whether made verbally in person, verbally on video, or written, comments are limited to a total of one per person per regular board meeting. One additional comment per person may be submitted for a public hearing topic if there is a public hearing on the agenda. All forms of public comment are subject to Chapter 4256 RCW Public Records Act. The public may comment at regular board meetings in a manner authorized by state law. All comments must adhere to Policy 1420 and Procedure 1420P. If you wish to make a comment to the board, comment forms are available for completion prior to the meeting and must be turned in no later than the beginning of the legislative report. No forms will be accepted once this report has begun. Comments are limited to 3 minutes. Public comments will be heard after the agenda review. Students will be the first to speak on any topic during the student voice portion of the agenda, which takes place immediately following this opening. General public comments from the non-students will be heard during preliminary communication from the audience. Any remaining comments, whether from students or non-students, will be heard at specific agenda items and during the final communication from the audience. Student comments will be heard first on any topic. Please state your first and last name prior to the beginning of your testimony. Abusive public comments personally directed towards the board, staff, or students will not be tolerated. The use of specific names or personally identifiable information of board, staff, or students is not allowed. Board members or KSD staff members may interrupt or terminate an individual statement when not adhering to Procedure 1420P. All comments, whether verbal or written, must adhere to the standards of civility as defined in Policy 1400, meeting conduct, order of business, and quorum. If you're seated in an overflow room, there is a brief delay in the live stream audio. We will allow extra time for you to make your way to the boardroom after your name is called. Individuals with items for the board or superintendent must provide them directly to safety services staff. Approaching the dais during the board meeting is not allowed. Any items turned in will be provided to the board and superintendent following the meeting. Director Clark, can you read our land acknowledgement, please?
We acknowledge we are gathered upon the ancestral lands of the Muckleshoot Indian tribe who historically lived throughout the area between the Cascade Mountains and Puget Sound.
Thank you. We are now on to item 1.07, agenda review. Superintendent Vela, are there any changes to the agenda?
President Margell, there is one change to the agenda. We'll be adding network cabling capacity improvement phase 2, bid acceptance and award of contract to cabling and technology services to the consent agenda as item 10.11.
I move that that be added to the consent agenda.
Is there a second?
Second.
A motion has been made and seconded. We are now open for discussion.
What caused this? Do we know? Like why it was left off in the first place?
Superintendent Vela?
Yeah, given that we do not have another board meeting in December, we needed to get this on here. It was originally going to go to the next board meeting, and we wouldn't have enough time. So basically,
Okay, thank you.
thank you.
Any additional comments or questions? Seeing none, there's a motion on the floor to add item number 10.011. Sorry, let me say that again. There's a motion and seconded on the floor to add item number 10.11 onto the consent agenda, network cabling capacity improvement phase 2 bid acceptance and award of contract to cabling and technology services. All those in favor, please raise your right hand and say aye. Aye.
Aye.
The motion passes 5-0. We are now on item, is there a, on item 1.07, is there a motion on the floor for the acceptance of the agenda? Don't we have to?
I thought,
I think that last one was just to add the
Yeah, we still have to.
10.11. So we have to have a motion on the floor to accept the agenda as presented with the addition of 10.11.
move to approve the agenda as amended with addition of 10.11.
Second.
The motion has been made and seconded. We are now open for discussion. Seeing as there is none, there is a motion on the floor that has been seconded for the approval of the consent agenda, including the addition of item 10.11. All those in favor, please raise your right hand and say aye.
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 The motion passes 5-0. We're now on section 2.0, recognition and
Reorganization.
I'm sorry, thank you. Not recognition, let's reorganize. Reorganization of the Board of Directors and election of officers. And so I call upon Superintendent Bella.
Thank you, President Margell. As the Secretary of the Board, I will conduct the reorganization of the board and election of officers. According to Policy 1210, at the first regular meeting in December, the board will elect from among its members a president and a vice president to serve one-year terms. The term of the office will run from the election of officers at the December regular meeting to the election of the officers at the December regular meeting of the following year. Every other year, a legislative representative will be elected to serve for a two-year term. Director Clark was elected in 2023 and for a two-year term. Therefore, there will not be an election for legislative representative this evening for the upcoming year. I will now begin the reorganization of the board and election of officers for president, board president. Do I have a nomination?
Mr. Chair, I nominate Megan Margell for president.
I have a nomination of Megan Margell. Do I
I'll
have?
second that.
There's a second. Do I have another nomination?
I nominate myself.
I have a nomination for Director Cook. Are there any other nominations?
I'll move my nomination to Director Cook.
So Director Cook has been nominated.
Sorry, I mean vote. Or second Director Cook's nomination.
So currently we have Board Member 1 as Director Margell, Board Member 2 is Director Cook. Do I have any other nominations? Hearing none, I will now close the nominations. You will vote on each nominated member separately. Please only vote for one member for president. The vote will be by oral roll call, and a majority, 3, is required. When you are called to vote, please say aye or no and raise your right hand. When 3 or more votes take place in favor of one nominee, the nominee wins the seat and the voting discontinues for that office. In the event of a 2-2 tie, voting will start over via a second roll call vote between the two board members who are tied. And now I'll call for the vote for board member
Is there
number one.
no discussion?
There's no discussion.
Okay.
I will now call for the vote for the nominated board number one, Megan Margell, as president. Director Song,
Nay.
Director Cook,
Nay.
Director Clark,
Yes.
Director Farah,
Yes.
Director Margell.
Yes.
As shared in my opening, if the vote has a majority of 3, when an aye or no vote has been given, then, at that time, voting discontinues for that office.
May I have a point of clarification, please? I do not believe that it's required that we have a second on a nomination.
Can I have Mr. Leonard please come up and
It's not included in your policy, but using Robert's rules, seconds are generally used. There would be nothing preventing a director from providing a second and voting differently, or providing a second for both candidates.
Thank you for the clarification.
Thank you. I will call out President Margell is now president, effective immediately. I will now move to open nominations for vice president.
I nominate Director Song.
I second that nomination.
I have a nomination for Director Song.
I nominate Director Farah.
I have a nomination for Director Farah. Are there any other nominations for vice president?
Am I able to reject a nomination?
Mr. Leonard, would you please approach?
Certainly, if an individual does not want to serve in a capacity that's elected, they are not required to do so. Certainly, your board policy contemplates the fact that there's a possibility that a president or a vice president might not serve. In this case, if elected, the individual does not serve, it would be appropriate to conduct another vote based on the election.
So Director Song, I'm hearing that you would like to withdraw your nomination as board number one for vice president?
Yes, yes. My time commitments are too great, and I don't think I'd be able to appropriately fulfill that duty.
Thank you, Director Song. I will move Director Farah to board member number one as board member number one nomination for vice president. Do I have another nomination for vice president? Hearing none,
I'll nominate Director Cook as well.
I have a nomination for board director number two, Director Cook as vice president. Are there any additional nominations? Hearing none, I will now close the nominations for vice president. You will now vote on each nominated member separately. Please only vote for one member for vice president. The vote will be by oral roll call, and a majority 3 is required. When you are called to vote, say aye or no and raise your right hand. When 3 or more votes take place in favor of one nominee, that nominee wins the seat and voting discontinues for that office. In the event of a 2-2 tie, voting will start over via a second roll call vote between the two board members who are tied. I will now move to call for the vote. Board member number 1, Director Farah as Vice President. I will call first Director Song. What is your vote for Vice President?
Nay.
Director Koch, what is your vote for Vice President?
Nay.
Director Clark, what is your vote for Vice President?
Yes.
Director Farah, what is your vote for Vice President?
Nay.
Director Margell, what is your vote for Vice President?
Yay.
So at this time, we have 2 votes for yes and 3 nays for Vice President. Does not carry. Mr. Leonard, could you please approach and advise?
So if I have a tally correct, it does not pass because it requires 3 board directors, which would be a majority of, and therefore it does not pass.
What were we voting for?
Director Farah for Vice President. So then we'll move
see.
to Director Cook.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. We will now move forward as there was not a tie. I will move to turn it over to President Margell at this time to continue.
We have an open, there's still a open director for the vice president position. We should go through and do a yay-nay vote for the second candidate.
That is correct. The nomination was for Director Cook as Vice.
Got it, sorry, my bad. I thought that was true. We will now move to the second board member, Director Cook. My apologies. I will start with Director Song. What is your vote for Vice President?
Yay.
Director Cook, what is your vote for Vice President?
Aye.
Director Clark, what is your vote for Vice President?
No.
Director Farah, what is your vote for Vice President?
Yay.
Director Margell, what is your vote for Vice President?
No.
Board Member 2, Director Cook. We have 3 yeses and 2 noes. That carries. Vice President. Director Cook is Vice President, effective immediately. I will now turn it over to President Margell.
Thank you. We now move to our student voice section, and let me look at how many comments that we have.
Yes, that student is this one, and that one's the first.
For our student public comments, we have 1 in-person comment, no online, and no written comments. Our first student commenter is, it looks like Tyler Butcher.
Hi, my name is Tyler Butcher, and I'm a student who works in the theater at Kentwood High School. I'm also currently enrolled in the ASL class. I'm taking my 2nd year this year. On September 13th this year, I started the process of requesting an ASL interpreter for my theater's performance of 6, which would be in 60 days from that date. What followed this, well, what I assumed would follow this was a series of events in which I would contact someone and a request would be made and filled out in about 2 to 3 weeks, as I had received advising that that's about how long this kind of thing should take. It took 50 days for the first communication between someone from the Kent School District and an interpreting agency to be made. It took 50 just for that. It got passed around to multiple departments within the district and within my school, Kentwood itself. Many staff members got involved, I'll name them, and a lot of emails were sent between people trying to figure out who was responsible for this. There was clearly no protocol in place Nobody had the job of approving this kind of request, which is in direct violation of ADA law, specifically Title II, specifying that all public entities, including schools, are not to discriminate based on disability and must ensure access to their programs and services. While progress has been made and there is currently change going on within the Kent School District to make sure that there is a process for this in the future, the outcome of this was disappointing in that people in the community who are deaf were unable to attend the show simply for the reason because they are deaf. We were verbatim told that the service was not provided, which is frankly unacceptable. I'd just like this to be known to the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Tyler. We now move on to section 4.0 and our presentation of our years of service. I call upon Superintendent Bell to take us further on this conversation.
Okay, I'd like to invite our HR team up to the podium.
All right. Good evening, President Margell, Vice President Cook, members of the board, Superintendent Vela, and Ms. Curry. I am delighted to represent the Human Resources team today as we take an opportunity to recognize and celebrate our staff for their dedicated years of service to our student, staff, and community. All right, so a little bit about this, of course, overall, we never want to miss an opportunity to say thank you. So while this program has been around for many, many years, this is only the second year that we have had a presentation to the board. So excited again to continue that tradition from last year. Overview of how this program operates with the criteria. It is based solely on service with the Kent School District. It is honored in 5-year increments based on a hire date with between July and June. And based on continuing positions only, so no, this does not count any temporary or substitute work. And continuing does not necessarily mean continual. So if folks have left the district and returned, we do try and capture that experience as well. So overall for 2024, we honored 565 employees all across that spectrum. I want to take a moment to thank Linda Stoddard from our HR team who did an incredible job getting all of this data compiled, identifying our honorees this year, and getting those certificates that are sent out to buildings. So all of these staff get recognized with a certificate at that increment. For tonight, we are highlighting those specifically who are what we like to call the 25 plus club. So those who have hit the 25-year mark and above, we've invited them to attend this evening. So for those that were able to attend, as your year group is announced, I ask that you please stand to be recognized. I will do my best to call the names of those who RSVP'd and those who I saw sneak in who did not RSVP. And then at the very end of this, I would invite you up to have a photo with the board. So with that, I'm excited to announce our first group with 25 years of service. So this is going to have everybody who we are honored this year, but those who have reached 25, please stand. And those who said they were going to be here, Mr. Tim Graham, Wendy Mondier, Hal Norris, Ms. Galina Pinkovich, David Radford, Melissa Schultz, Stephanie Tebrink, and Mr. Tuan Vu. Thank you. All right, and moving to our 30 years of service. It's fun watching these lists get smaller and smaller. Here are nominees nominees. Please stand if you are here for our 30-year. I saw Ms. Lindy Barron come on in. Thank you. I know Ms. Shermanita Jones-Bigham said she was going to be, there she is. Thank you. Anyone else that I missed? All right, last year I missed a couple, so I'm making sure this time. All right, with 35 years of service, joining us tonight is Mr. Rick Hopkins. All right, and now we are down to those solo on their list. And I know for sure with 40 years of service, very excited to honor Mr. Darren Blackwell. Nice work. And I do not believe he is able to join us today, but 45 years of service, we would like to honor Mr. Gerald Olson. All And with that, just more than anything, again, never missing the opportunity to say thank you. There is no easy job in education, so thank you for continuing to show up every single day. We could not do this without you. All right. All right, and if you can join us for a picture up front with the board, if you were able to join us today. Yeah.
Your left just a little bit. There you go. Right to the right just a little bit. Count 3. 1, 2, 3. We take one more. 1, 2, 3. Congratulations. All right. Nice job.
Andy's out.
It's all right, you're still in the form. Yeah.
Is the fair still on?
Could we please confirm which directors are still joining us via our live stream? Director Song or Director Farah? Okay, we're going to take a quick 2-minute recess to try to get our directors back connected with us. Thank you. Our next section is 4.02, our proclamation for Guest Employee Appreciation Month.
Thank you, Madam President. Guest Employee Appreciation Month proclamation. Whereas guest employees serve throughout the Kent School District, effectively adapting to the culture of each building to provide a continuity of educational services for students. And whereas guest employees are flexible and resilient, providing a bridge between full-time employees and students by stepping in to serve when needed. And whereas guest employees play a vital role in maintaining high levels of education in our schools while enabling staff to engage in professional development to enhance skills and abilities. And whereas guest employees provide coverage for employees to address situations that arise in life. And whereas the service of guest employees keep our students learning and positively contribute to our mission in successfully preparing all students for their futures. Now therefore be it resolved, the Board of Directors of the Kent School District proclaim the month of December as Guest Employee Appreciation Month to recognize the contribution of guest employees and urges all citizens to join in this observance.
Thank you very much to our guest employees and to Director Clark for reading that. Our next section, 4.03, Proclamation of Inclusive Schools. Director Cook, would you mind reading that?
Sure. Let's see. So Kent School District Proclamation, Inclusive Schools Week. Whereas the Inclusive Schools Network and schools around the world have designated the week of December 5th through the 9th, 2024, as Inclusive Schools Week, and whereas Kent School District is committed to providing an education in schools and classrooms that are welcoming and capable of educating all children, and whereas the educators and staff of Kent School District, sorry, did you have something? Oh, I thought I heard you say something, sorry.
No, I'm
It's okay.
sorry, I didn't.
Recognize that each child is unique, learns differently, and therefore learns better if teaching is tailored to their abilities and interests. And whereas the educators, staff, and families of Kent School District have been working hard to ensure that our classrooms and schools are characterized as being high-performing and inclusive. And whereas by their efforts to make our schools and classrooms high-performing and inclusive, the educators, staff, and families of Kent School District have contributed significantly to building a stronger and more inclusive community. And whereas the educators, staff, and families of Kent School District deserve to celebrate their successes and wish to reflect on how they might even further improve. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Board of Directors of the Kent School District encourage schools and classrooms across our district to sponsor appropriate learning and community building activities to recognize Inclusive Schools Week, signed this 11th day of December 2024.
Thank you very much, Director Cook, for reading that. I am very excited for our next section, our presentations from Kent Ridge High School. And Superintendent Vela, would you please introduce our speakers?
Absolutely. Thank you, President. Absolutely. Thank you, President Margell. I am thrilled to welcome Dr. Kim to the podium, who will introduce our presenters for this evening. Dr. Kim.
Good evening. Newly again, President Margell. Congratulations, Board Directors, Superintendent Vela, and Ms. Curry. I too am very thrilled. I do have to say I think this is my favorite part of board meetings now. We are now in our second of a year-long series of school presentations. Before I do introduction of our Executive Director, who's going to introduce our school here, I do want to just highlight something new that you may see in the slide deck today. You see a new metric, and it's called Panorama. Panorama is a pilot survey that we are implementing this school year in the fall and the spring with our secondary schools. All high school and middle school programs and academies are participating in a survey that is centered around social emotional learning, student well-being, and sense of belonging. And so our drive there was to have a more system-wide metric that is aligned to our strategic plan goal around sense of belonging. And so you're going to see something there that's new, and so I just wanted to make sure that you understood that this isn't specific to Kent Ridge, and you're going to start seeing and hearing more about this. Really excited. This is something that 25% of public schools in America do use, and we are able to progress monitor and align it more to our new SIP goal around culture and climate. So with that, I am going to leave it to our Executive Director of School and Leadership Success, Doris Johnson, introduce our esteemed principal. Come on up.
Hello, everybody. I'm really excited to bring up Principal Krista Ernst from Kent Ridge High School. She is in her 3rd year being principal of, her and I jokingly say she's the mayor of a small city. There are many things happening at Kent Ridge. If you get the opportunity to come see, please do. Anything from the play to student groups. You will walk in the building and see student work up, friendly students able to come and help you, and a lot of that is due to Krista's leadership. And so she's going to now come up and introduce the main guest for this evening.
Good evening, President Margell, members of the board, Superintendent Vela, Ms. Curry, and Ms. Zanello. I'm Principal Ernst, and I am proud to be here to talk about the community that we have over on the Ridge, as we say. Before we get to our student recognition, I want to talk a little bit about our school. Some of this school overview data I'm not going to really dive into, as it is available online, and it really is just sort of giving you a sense of what our school is. I will spend a little bit of time to talk about what we have been working towards in our building and the impact that that has had on our school community, and I will end with honoring one of our students. So we are currently the largest comprehensive high school in the Kent School District. We are just over 2,200 on any given day. Even just this week, I had 3 or 4 more students enroll. So we are continuously getting new kids in, and we do have kids who are exiting, but we are currently the largest school in Kent District. Our demographic data, as you see, pretty even spread amongst the grade levels. We have an increase. One of the things that has been increasing in our Kent Ridge community is our multilingual demographics and students who qualify for free and reduced lunch, which is continuing to evolve and make the needs of our school grow. And so that is one of the things that I will be talking about here, is that we have been really actively thinking about how are we engaging those in our community who are new and who haven't fallen into the demographic trend of the school over the last 20 years. We have 4 languages other than English that are pretty heavily spoken, with Spanish, Vietnamese, Punjabi, and Somali. And we have been heavily relying upon the interpretation services provided through the school district to be able to talk to our families in a way that is effective and is being very thoughtful for what is the best way to support them and their children. And so those services are highly valued within our building. So last year, the school district rolled out iReady testing for reading at the high school level. It was brand new at the high school level. And while students were used to doing iReady testing at the middle schools, high school people were not used to doing iReady testing at the high schools. And so one of the things that we have been focusing on is not only getting our students tested, but also working on our teachers using that data to figure out how they can more effectively support their students. And the challenging part of that is, for those of you who know secondary schools, secondary teachers are trained in their content area, not necessarily in the practices of literacy. And so having a higher level of students with multilingual education experience, students who are behind in reading, is a challenge for secondary schools. And so we have been working to really harness the data that we have and to use that to figure out how we move forward to support our students. And we'll talk a little bit about how we're doing that in a few slides. Here we go. With our Smarter Balance assessment for ELA, it's a trend that I think most schools have seen coming out of the pandemic, where we had much higher levels before the pandemic, and we're really still just trying to get our traction back to move up. One of the things that I think has been impacting secondary schools in Kent was the change in some of the curricular adoptions, which even though curricular adoptions happen in, say, year one, it often takes 3 or 4 years before it fully gets integrated. And so I think we're about midway in that point. And so I hope to see some traction with that and with the additional, the data from the iReady testing. We have similar trend with math. Math, foundational skills had taken a large hit in the pandemic, and our teachers are still really trying to figure out how to gain that traction back with the focus on how do we support students in the classroom and how to provide them with opportunities outside of school. And I believe I have some information on that also in one of our slides. Science is a relatively new test. We had a curricular adoption in science recently that I think is gaining traction again within our schools. One of the things that we like to see with this data is improvement, but it also, these tests allow us to look at strand data to see where it is that students are needing the most support. And so we are working on doing that within our science classes also. Graduation rate, as you'll probably see in other presentations for other high schools, as the waivers available through the state expire, we're going to see some lagging behind in our graduation rates. And so we are diligently working to find opportunities to provide students with those extra supports to get where they need. We know that opportunities at some of our academies and programs are limited, and so I know myself and the other high school principals actively are working together to think through what are ways that we can support students just outside of our traditional classroom settings. Sorry, I'm just gonna, sake of time, go through these quickly. So attendance rates are tricky. We have a Becca person who actively reaches out to families, creates letters. We send parent meetings to try to support students. And one of the pieces that we are going to be, that we're hoping we can see through the panorama data is what are the reasons why students aren't coming to school? What is it, a connection piece? And so while the panorama data is new and maybe not as positive as we might like to initially think, we are very hopeful that it will allow us to dig into ways that we can better support students, which will hopefully increase data all across the board. So the panorama data, and while the numbers are less than stellar, I will say, one, we had about a 67% response rate, so just a little over half of our students responding. But the data was not shocking in the sense that we at Kent Ridge have seen that we have sort of a dichotomy. We have students who are very, very, very highly connected to the school, and we have students who are not. And there's not a lot in the middle. And so one of the things that we have been working on with our ASB officers and our student leadership groups and other service clubs is finding out what do students want in their school? What do they need to feel connected? And so we are actually really excited about this data because we can start to dig into what are we seeing trends with certain groups, with age levels, with students who speak a different language. Can we look at data from people who came from middle schools that were not traditionally pathed to Kent Ridge, right? Because and I think all of the high schools are feeling a similar sense of their demographics have changed, whose path to them has changed. And while at Kent Ridge, you can find kids who've had 3 generations of their family going through the school, we now have students who never thought that they would ever go to Kent Ridge. They maybe thought that they were going to be going to Kentwood, or maybe they were going to be going to Kent Meridian, and that connection is automatically not there, right? They had the expectation. So we're working on trying to figure out how much of that has an impact. Are we not providing a greater variety of resources or a greater variety of activities. And so we are very excited to be able to dig into the data to help us figure this out. And it has been something that my team has been working on since I came to Kent Ridge. Overall, the discipline data is not the greatest. It's a trend across the country. One of the things that we are looking at is, again, what are our expectations in schools? How are those expectations potentially clashing with the cultural expectations of groups coming in? And are there some things that we inherently do in our system that automatically creates a barrier for students in the system? And we have been actively working on providing students with the opportunity to talk about the issue. And we have had, while we're not full on into restorative practices, we have introduced concepts, we have practiced ideas, and we have several students and teachers who will have a restorative conversation with an administrator, and they come out with everybody being like, oh, I never thought about it that way. I see your point. And it doesn't become a punitive action, it becomes a learning experience for everybody involved, not just for the students. And so we're working on expanding that. The challenging piece is that's something that takes a lot more time, and we're trying to figure out how do we systematize that in a way that keeps it authentic and allows it to be done in a timely fashion. So we have definitely been exploring our options, and as I spend a lot of time talking to the other high school principals, and we are all working towards similar goals and often share ideas. And so I'm looking forward to how we can continue to move this forward. School improvement plan. I'm sorry, I didn't look at what time I started. Okay. So within our school improvement plan, we have, they are all aligned to the strategic plan within the district. And our reading goal is tied to seeing improvement in word comprehension, vocabulary comprehension, because that is something that's relevant in every single content. And what we find is sometimes students have difficulty in a content area because they don't know the content-specific words, or they don't know the things that are being asked of them. What's the difference between an analysis and synthesizing, right? And so what we have done is last year we had just a general set of words that we worked on as a school in a weekly presentation. We asked teachers to incorporate those into the lessons that they did. We even had our librarian who would incorporate the word into his question of the day. And then we had competitions via Kahoot, and then the winning class got donuts or some other treat. And so this year what we did is we asked for grade level specific words, and each grade level, the core teachers talked to each other and said, what are some words that cross different contents that are essential for students to know? And those words were chosen, and we're rolling that out in a similar fashion. And this is actually going to allow more classes to actually win and get a prize, and we know so many people are motivated by prizes regardless of your age. So instead of having a whole school-wide competition, it will be grade level, and so each grade level, we usually have like the top 3 classes get a prize. So we'll be able to acknowledge the efforts of more students. We did actually a pre-test also on the words, and then we'll do a post-test to see if those the activities and the intentional teaching of those words over time had improved in the end. So we're looking forward to seeing how that goes. For math, our goal is to have the percentage of students passing their Algebra 1-2 class as a foundational piece in math. And so we have our PLC teachers, or our Algebra 1 teachers are in a PLC, and they are working together to actively test, look at their data, make adjustments. We are also, we're getting our after-school tutoring started, which is very math and science focused, as a way to provide students with additional support outside of school. Science, our PLC time is being used for the chemistry teachers to continue aligning their teaching practices with the adopted curriculum, and again, using that information to figure out how to best support their students. And for our culture and climate, our goal with our student leadership group has been to have every student have at least one connection, one positive connection at school. And our leadership students have been doing a great job of when they do like a winter sports assembly, or if they're doing a spirit week, they are sending out, they're doing surveys to find out, did the themes we choose, were those things that people connected with? Did the activities we choose make you excited, make you feel included? And they have been looking to provide as many opportunities to clubs. I think we probably have 40 different clubs, and every year we get at least 3 or 4 more added. And so we have been actively looking for clubs to increase the type, to diversify the types of programming available. And we've probably had 4 clubs that are sort of, that are cultural related that have been added this school year. So really just looking for ways for students to feel connected in an authentic way, right? Not make them feel like I have to choose one of these 10 activities. We have 40 plus activities because those are all things that students are interested in. And so people know, right, that if students feel connected, they will be more successful in school. And so that's been our primary goal, is how do we feel, how can we make students feel connected? And it doesn't have to be with the classroom teacher, right? It could be with somebody who is a para, somebody who works in the lunchroom, right? A custodial staff member. We want to provide opportunities for students to feel connected wherever they can find that. And that dovetails greatly with our student highlight, because this student, I think, is a great example of really looking to find something that a student then can connect with and how that can be a real positive experience. So our student that we would like to recognize is Taryn Watkins. I'm going to give Taryn her certificate here for a moment. We'll gather up. I'm going to give a brief, just brief description, and then I'm going to actually let Taryn speak for herself. But Taryn this year is in the 10th grade, and we had a community-based organization come in, and they presented, they carried out something called the Royal Project. Real one-of-a-kind young aspiring leaders. They were young women of color. And prior to, and this was last year as a 9th grader, 9th grade's a rough year for everybody. And Taryn, I don't think, was any exception. She had a little bit of a bumpy start, but she participated in this project and greatly improved her connection with the school and her progress. This year, she is a member of the basketball team, and Taryn has been a great self-advocate, and I think a lot of it is due to the fact that we really work to find a community organization to work with students in our school. So, Taryn.
Okay. First and foremost, I want to say thank you, everyone here tonight, for showing up and being present in tonight's event. I also want to thank the board for this humbling opportunity. This wasn't an easy battle, but I have strived for greatness and to better myself in many ways, and this award is an honor to receive. Special thanks to my parents for continuing to push me to be better. I will continue to put my best foot forward each and every day. But also, thank you, Ms. Ernst, for nominating me tonight.
Taryn, would you mind having a picture with our board? And
Yes.
then maybe we could get a picture of mom and dad with Taryn?
Count 3, 1, 2, 3. Let's get a couple more. 1, 2, 3. Great, thank you.
Oh, is. Oh, right. Board. Yep, come on back, you guys. Oh, we get one with the board and one with. Yeah, board members. Okay. We'll get one first.
We'll get one, yeah. Count 3, 1, 2, 3. Take a couple more. 1, 2, 3. Thank you. see. 1, 2, 3. All right, one more. 1, 2, 3. Congratulations.
Thank you very much, Taryn, Principal Ernst, and Ms. Johnson, and Director Kim for that presentation. We now move on to 6.0, the preliminary comments from our audience and community. Tonight, we have 0 general comments, 2 in-person specific comments that we will do in 2 different parts of the agenda, 1 online general comment, 0 specific comments, and then there's 1 written comment that was included in all the board folders and also will be made available in paper tonight. So since there's no general in-person comments, we will move to the general online comment.
Good evening, President Markell and distinguished board members. For the record, it's Leslie K. Hamada, Kent and Covington resident and taxpayer at 28026 189th Avenue Southeast for over 30 years. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. First, speaking for the citizens for Kent Schools, thank you to all the citizen taxpayers for passing this levy. It was not a decisive win, but a win to pass enough to pass the levy. Let's always keep in mind our kids who should be the focus of every decision we make in the Kent School District. They will benefit and our staff will benefit. However, our work is not done. To keep our buildings, maintenance, supplies, and staff in the best position in the future, more involvement is badly needed. But it cannot be done without parents, teachers, staff, admin, and yes, even our customers, our students. Being involved and working together, we are in challenging times for education and challenging in bringing diverse and opposing views into one main goal. What we all share, young and old, our kids and our future communities. We need a lot more involvement in individuals, listening to one another and respecting each other's opinions. Bonds and levies going forward have to be community-led long before they get to the voting public. Involvement and listening has to increase. We cannot fail to work together. For our kids, the stakes are too high and too long-lasting. Thank you for your time.
That's the end of our preliminary comments from the audience. We'll now move on to the superintendent report, section 7.0. Superintendent Vella, I call on you for your report.
Thank you, President Margell. Tonight, I'd like to share several shout-outs, as typically do, and recognitions and some informational pieces. As I mentioned earlier on at the November 13th board meeting, I shared some optimism regarding the KSD levy. At that time, I was optimistic. Now that the election results are complete, I'd like to express my sincere gratitude to all members of the Kent School District community who participated in the recent election and Citizens for Kent Schools Committee for their unwavering support. Your engagement is vital to the success of our district, and we appreciate the time and effort the community took to vote. As a result of that support, 36,856 individuals voted in favor of the Kent School District, leading to the certification of Proposition 1 on November 26th. Your involvement plays a crucial role in shaping the future of our schools. Once again, thank you for your participation and for being an integral part of the Kent School District community. As you know, we had some stormy weather a couple of weeks ago. That's to put it lightly. It was a huge undertaking by many, many staff, not to mention our community who endured it. With that said, the bomb cyclone storm in November was something that really impacted not just the Kent School District, but really the whole state of Washington in different ways. So I'd like to give a huge shout out to all of our teams, and that includes the following: building administrators, maintenance and operations staff, including IT, and the inclement weather team. These teams were constantly communicating, coordinating, collaborating in order to make sure schools were safe for our students and staff to attend. We also took into account the challenges and opportunities that our community was facing. If we were facing that, our communities were facing that threefold. So we took that into account. Everybody stepped up to get our buildings up and running and online and connected. A huge shout out again. Please note that the updated district calendar is available now on the KSD website for your reference. Again, thank you to all those teams. Guest Employee Appreciation Month. Thank you, Director Clark. I believe for reading that proclamation. I want to share a little bit of data for you to go with that. Our substitute services team works very hard to make sure positions are filled, and they keep data for us on a regular basis. Some of those highlights are really attributed to their dedication and their hard work. Currently, our substitute pools for guest teachers, 486 guest teacher pool. That is amazing, considering what districts around us have gone through. So those are guest teachers. For our paraeducators, guest paraeducators, 160 paraeducators. And for our guest clerical staff, keep in mind, the office staff is integral to every school building, every building, I would say. We have 55 guest clerical staff in that pool, which provides us with the support we need whenever some support is needed. The fill rate for vacancies and absences has increased by 10% from the end of last year. 10% increase. And with the fill rate for certificated staff, that's averaging 95%. That's very high for districts around us. And thank you to our guest employees and our dedicated substitute services team for your efforts and your continued support. Kent Ridge and Meeker Unified Robotics Teams Awards 2024 Washington State Championships. KSD Unified Teams provide those with different intellectual abilities with the opportunity to serve alongside peers and collaborate on designing, building, and competing in robotics. Kent Ridge took home awards. We just got a chance to hear them today. They took home awards for Team Spirit, Control Through Automation, Rising Star, and Perseverance Award. Meeker Middle School teams earned the following. They earned Sportsmanship Award, the Rising Star Award, the Inclusion Award, the Exceptional Feature Award and the Perseverance Award. Congratulations to these students and their advisors. Job well done. The Washington State Association of School Psychologists. Also, I wanted to do a shout out. Rachel Monasterio. She is a school psychologist at Panther Lake and Glen Ridge Elementary Schools. She's being recognized by the Washington State Association of School Psychologists as our 2024 recipient of the Best Practices Award for Assessment. In her nomination, she was described by her colleagues as someone who implements culturally responsive practices in assessments and interventions, ensuring all students feel seen and valued. Congratulations, Rachel. Child nutrition eligibility. As our board heard this evening at our work session, I would be putting also information out. It is very important. This is a reminder to our families. Please remember to complete a child nutrition eligibility and education benefits application to help our schools secure funds for essential programs. Those programs include the following: after-school activities, additional staff, classroom resources. It also reduces or eliminates fees for extracurricular activities, technology fines, and provides qualifying families with additional benefits. Please visit our website and navigate to the Nutrition Services section for more information. Kent Schools Foundation. The Kent Schools Foundation has once again provided an incredible award to the Kent School District. This year, the Kent School District Foundation awarded a record-breaking $67,000 in grants and 131 projects at 35 schools. These grants are the highest amount ever distributed in the foundation's history, directly funded innovative and enriching projects that benefit our KSD students. Some of the items funded, there's a wide array of them. I'm going to read off just a couple of them, are tailored to meet the diverse needs of Kent students across our district. They include class sets of books for literacy programs, STEM toys for libraries, technology classes to spark curiosity and innovation, art materials, flexible seating options to support varied learning styles, a washer and dryer, yes, a washer and dryer for life skill classes, building independence and real-world skills. Additional books for Battle of the Books. Those of you who've had an opportunity to see that, wonderful opportunity to do that when that comes around yearly. Field trips, just to name a few. A number of other learning opportunities. Again, we're grateful to that partnership and their ongoing commitment to equity in our school district. Thank you very much. And in closing, as we approach the winter season and many of you spend more time with loved ones, I encourage each of you to embrace the spirit of togetherness and carry it into the coming year. Let us dedicate ourselves in the new year to lifting each other up, working hand in hand for the benefit of our students, and anticipating a vibrant year ahead of us in the Kent School District. That concludes my report.
Thank you very much, Superintendent Vela. We now move to Section 8.0, our legislative update. This is when our all remaining comment cards need to be turned into the blue box. Seeing that there's nobody running up there to do that, Director Clark, could you give us the legislative update?
I'm hoping that I can, there it is. All right, this will be a very brief report. Obviously, in January, the state legislature will come into session with the newly electeds and begin the long session, 120 days of legislative work. Now, the reason I asked for this website to be brought up is this is the website for the Washington State Legislature. And just a gentle reminder, yes, it is true that the K through 12 system is the single largest expenditure of money in the state budget. Nevertheless, it is 100,000 different parts. And so what's going to happen as we start to go into January and February, when it comes my turn as a legislative rep, I will draw your attention to a specific bill that deals with a specific chunk of money that would impact students' lives in this school district. So as you can see, you can feed in there the bill number, and I would be feeding that to you, and then you can check its status. But on this website, you also have the capability of sending a message to your state legislators. And obviously, the impact is it's from you, the voter, and it's specifically to your rep. So in the 47th district, Stearns and Indeman are in the House and Clemente in the Senate. And in the 33rd, which also covers part of the Kent School District, there will be a new state senator, and it almost certainly will be one of the two state reps. That would be Mia Gregerson or Tina Orwell. And then there will be a replacement for whichever one of those reps moves up to the state Senate seat. And that, by the way, is appointed by the King County Council. So it's a temporary appointment until the next election go around. And the replacement for the vacant House seat is a gentleman by the name of Sam Mendez. So all that will be updated as those things take place, and that will take place about the third week in January, where it's all totally accurate. But I just wanted you to know what we're referring to. If I have a bill and it's, transportation, and that's a very specific pool of money, and obviously it's the fifth largest school district in the state, it's a big deal. So if we say that we really need help, I would be asking the voters of this district to support our classrooms and teachers and buildings and whatnot. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Director Clark. We now move on to section 9.0, our section on discussion and approval. Is there a motion?
I would like to poll 901.
This is, we've actually moved this one. This is discussion and approval, so then we would need a motion for approval.
I move to approve 9.01, gifts, donations, and/or memorials acceptance.
I'll second that.
The motion has been made and seconded. We are now open for discussion.
All right. This is going to be a little tougher than ordinary. There have been a number of folks that have done significant things to support individual buildings, but I'm going to start with KM because they had an unusual situation. Kent Meridian High School, of course, is the original of the 5 high schools we currently entertain. One of their students, Bradley Hill, passed away recently. And there was a little history behind that. He literally got involved in band-type music at Mill Creek and then moved on to KM, where he participated in the music program. And he truly was a gifted individual. He literally was self-taught in both guitar and piano, but he made his name in terms of moving up into jazz band and so forth on drums. And clearly, his band director at KM did a nice job of trying to help him broaden his skills, getting him into definite rhythm, such as jazz as a means of moving along. And so when he graduated from high school, he went out and participated in a band group. One was called the Seize the Sun, and then eventually they broke up, and another one is the Hotel Robbery. And you actually can pull up on YouTube look up Bradley Hill or those two bands and actually hear some of the work that he did. He later on went to work in Schilling Cider, and it turns out that he had expertise in that area and worked on not only the equipment but the development of some of their products. Eventually, Brad was responsible for the creation of the Schilling Excelsior brand cider, which was the largest selling on the West Coast, #1 seller. In any case, the result is that they won, when he passed at a young age in his 30s, they wanted to do something that would carry on his memory. And so the Schilling Cider Group and the Hill family combined in a fundraiser and eventually raised $3,550, which goes to Kent Meridian to provide equipment and or materials for the advancement and development of the student music studies and needs of Kent Meridian High School. Panther Lake Elementary got from the Knights of Columbus equipment to the tune of $4,500 to provide winter coats to kindergarten and first grade students. That's 133 students. iGrad Academy got from Amazon Distributor MV 1000 for backpacks and soft shell lunch boxes. Pine Tree Elementary got from GESA Credit Union $1,250 for a Burke Museum mobile, which I would be fascinated to take a look at. The Kent School District got $724 in equipment from Lowe's Home Improvement that included a Blackstone griddle with hood and tank for sponsored athletic events and meetings. Kent Meridian High School from Melio Customer Campus Multimedia got $1,000 cash for their athletic program expenses. And Scenic Hill Elementary from Amazon site BF14 got $10,000 in equipment. That equates 200 backpacks filled with supplies for students. And we thank all of these people for their support for our schools.
Thank you very much.
Need a vote.
Yes. Is there any more discussion on any of items from 9.01, gifts, donations, and memorials acceptance?
No.
Seeing there is none, there is a motion on the floor for approval of 9.01, gifts, donations, and memorials acceptance. All those in favor, please raise your right hand and say aye.
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 Director Song?
Director Song?
Sorry, it's a little laggy over here.
That's fine. Aye. The motion passes 4-0.
Were we not able to get Director Farrar back?
I do not believe Director Faraz is still connected. Is there a motion for 9.02?
Move approval of 9.02, third reading and approval of policy 1620, the board superintendent relationship.
I'll second that.
The motion's been made and seconded. We do have specific comments about this one, and so I did want to pull up our community member, Greta Nelson.
Good evening, KSD board and district officials and staff attending here tonight. My name is Greta Nelson. I am a parent of a student in this district. I am very concerned at the direction of this district and the red line changes and new procedure for board policy 1620 only add to that concern. The performance and actions of the superintendent since he was put into his position have not qualified him for the recent substantial increase in compensation and benefits, let alone a contract extension. Now the superintendent has drafted a procedure related to a policy that is an overreach and abuse of position. It is an attempt to be a gatekeeper of communications and to limit the authority of the board in providing oversight of the superintendent and limit access to the board of staff concerns. Being a gatekeeper does not enhance communications or a board member's understanding of the issues. It creates a filter. The staff of this district, in addition to the public, have every right to access to the school board, district's board and elected officials without having these limitations placed upon that access by this board's one employee, the superintendent. Another concern I have regarding this board superintendent relationship, the current board president admittedly negotiated the superintendent's contract extension without having first received parameters or a formal approval for the negotiation from the full board. Please watch the YouTube replay of the contract extension meeting for the board president's admission regarding the negotiation process, as well as legal counsel's confirmation of that involvement. Being in the role of board president does not give that person in that role any greater authority or ability to take individual action in regards to board matters. The KSD's own board policies state that no individual board member has any greater authority outside of the majority consensus of the board. Negotiating a contract is taking individual action. Board policies 1620 and 1220 need to be clarified that the board president does not have any ability to take individual action on behalf of the board without formal consent. Board Policy 1815, Ethical Conduct, identifies the core ethical principles for board member conduct as objectivity, selflessness, stewardship, transparency, and integrity. These core principles are not being modeled by a certain majority of this board, its president especially, and this district's superintendent. Moving on to the recent suspension of Resolution 1669 at the October 9th meeting, this board did not follow its own policy in providing an opportunity for both oral and written comment regarding an amendment or the suspension of a policy. Board Policy 1320 regarding the suspension states, a policy of the board will be subject to suspension by a majority vote of the members present, provided all board members have received notice of the meeting and provided notice, including a proposal to suspend a policy and an explanation of purpose. If such proposal is not made in writing in advance of the meeting, a policy may be suspended only by unanimous vote of all board members present. If I
Thank you, Ms.
recall, it
Nelson.
was
Your
2
time is up.
aye and
Thank you, Ms.
1
Nelson.
abstention.
Thank you.
Not
We are open for discussion from the board.
Is anyone going to be reading the written comment? They did request it. Granted, they didn't invoke the request through a disability request, but as we don't know that it isn't one, are we going to take care of that?
Since
as we
we-
stated before?
It has been the policy of the board that if somebody chooses to put something through a written comment, then it's distributed to us as written. They have the option of doing a video comment or a in-person comment. And so since this was chosen not to do either one of those, then it's provided through written comment.
They just also asked that we read it aloud, and I remember when we discussed this in the past, that if someone wanted to have us read it aloud, that we would, based on ensuring that all of our, members of our community that are living with disabilities are able to not even have to state that their disability in the first place, but if this board doesn't want to do so, I guess that's okay.
Again, we've given ample opportunity for people to have their comments read by
Okay.
themselves or in person or on video.
Okay, well, I'll go ahead and read it then. So this is coming from a commenter. I'm not going to say their name just because I don't know if they would like me to, but it's regarding 1620P.
Well, if you're going to read it, you should read the whole thing, right?
I'm reading the whole thing. I'm just not saying their name.
From Jennifer Lyons.
Okay, that's fine. This comment is regarding the proposed new procedure 1620P. Mr. Vella, you must be mistaken, so I will correct you. The KSD board works for us, the taxpayers, not for you. Attempting to restrict the public's access, whether staff or not, to board members is abhorrent, dishonest, and reeks of corruption. The public already doesn't trust you. Do you think this is going to help your image? Please read this comment aloud, time allowing.
Thank you. Did you have any additional comments?
I'm a little concerned that Director Farrar isn't available, and considering this is a direct, effect against our board or with our board, would the board be open to tabling this until our next meeting when we have a full complement of our board to make that decision?
I guess my,
Hey, sorry, this is Andy. I guess I am confused about the request. What are we requesting to table?
This is about 1620.
So Director Song, and for the board, we have a motion and a second with discussion. Currently, the board is in discussion, following discussion to vote on 9.02. That's where the board is currently.
I too would love to have all the board members available at all of our meetings, but so it seems that some have not been able to do that. And so the work of the board, I believe, needs to go on. And this was provided, remember, we've done 3 readings of this, and it goes back into the end of last year, if I remember this correctly. Director Farah has had ample opportunity through our policy discussions, through his personal ability to go in and comment on the board policy, to be part of the policy work sessions, and the number of different readings. This did move on unanimously into the approval process here today. And so it would be of my opinion that we would move on with the work of the board.
I mean, I understand that. I do. The problem that I have with it is just that because this specific policy has ties to the work of the board, not just an item for discussion amongst the board about something happening within the district, but this actually impacts board members directly. Personally, I wouldn't feel comfortable moving forward with something where I don't get to hear Director Farah's voice on this issue, or honestly on most issues, but especially something that is going to possibly hinder his ability to do his work as a board director based on the procedure that is tied to this policy. And so for that reason, I think we should table this and wait until we're able to get all board members here to discuss and approve if so chosen.
For clarification, not just for Director Cook, for the full board, this is a 3rd reading. 3rd reading means the board has had opportunities, 2 different ones during work sessions, and this is a 3rd one where it was moved, as President Margell mentioned. In addition, board has individual folders that they can give input to. So just for the board's reminder, full board has had the opportunity to discuss, opportunity to ask questions, and it was moved based on board consensus to move forward.
Has anyone spoken to Director Farah about this particular policy and his thoughts whatsoever?
Well, we wouldn't be discussing board topics outside of the dais, but during the policy work sessions, he has had ample opportunity, also looking at the red lines and any comments that he has that they would have been incorporated into anything that we had as part of our policy work sessions on this one.
Did he have any comments to add to after the 2nd reading between then and now on this policy? Was there anything added, or does anyone know if he actually had a chance to read it? I haven't spoken to Director Farah in quite some time.
If he did, they would have been presented during the work session, and so I would say yes.
Plus, Pam has already indicated that he had no further input.
Okay, my worry is that he has not had a chance to review any changes that were made after the 2nd reading, as well as this procedure that is attached as well. I just don't believe that, at least not without confirmation from him, I don't feel comfortable moving forward.
I appreciate that, and as I mentioned,
Yep.
I believe full board has.
Yep. And thank you for reiterating my comments, Superintendent Vela. I would suggest on this one, then voting your conscience on this one, if you, as all of our items are.
Okay.
Director Song, did you have any comments on this?
No, I mean, I think I'm in agreement with you, Director Margell. I think we've had the time to discuss this, and I'm willing to move forward.
And I agree.
Thank you very much. Okay, seeing no further comments, we have a motion on the floor for approval of 9.02, third reading and approval of policy 1620, the board superintendent relationship. All those in favor?
Can I ask for a roll call vote on this one?
Director Song?
Nay.
Director Cook?
Nay.
Director Clark?
Yes.
I vote yes. The motion does not pass. Is there a motion for item 9.03?
Move approval. Go ahead.
I move to approve 9.03, third reading and adoption of policy 4237, contests, advertising, and promotions.
Second.
There's been a motion made and seconded for approval of 9.03, third reading and adoption of policy 4237, contests, advertising, and promotions. We are now open for discussion.
So this one looks like it's new to KSD. Did we not have any sort of policy whatsoever before, or is this just something that we're adding in because the state has changed something?
Not sure I understand the question.
Pam, can I help?
Could you repeat the question, Director Cook?
It's a new policy.
Okay, is it based on a change in law? Is that what I mean?
It's WASDA.
Oh, okay, WASDA added it.
Was a model.
Okay, that makes sense. That's all. I was curious why we didn't have one before.
Seeing no further discussion, there's a motion on the floor for approval of 9.03, third reading and adoption of policy 4237, contests, advertising, and promotions. All those in favor, please raise your right hand and say aye.
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 The motion passes 4-0. Is there a motion on the floor?
Move approval of 904, second reading and approval of policy 5001, hiring of retired school employees.
Second.
The motion's been made and seconded for approval of 9.04, second reading and approval of policy 5001, hiring of retired school employees. We are now open for discussion.
Yeah, it actually, as memory serves me correct, this is just in conformance to the writing in state law.
Okay, so it's just a matter of because it looks like it's just a bunch of changes, but they're substantially the same as far as I can tell.
Mm-hmm.
Seeing that there is no further discussion, there's a motion on the floor for approval of 9.04, second reading and approval of policy 5001, hiring of retired school employees. All those in favor, please raise your right hand and say aye.
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 The motion passes 4-0. Is there a motion on the floor?
I move to approve 9.05, second reading and approval of policy 5005, employment, disclosures, certification requirements, assurances, and approval.
Second.
The motion has been made and seconded for approval of item 9.05, second reading and approval of policy 5005, employment, disclosure, certification requirements, assurances, and approval. We are now open for discussion.
Can I ask a question about the policy or the procedure that's attached to this policy now, or should I wait until then? It's not major, it just is a question I have about wording.
I would say the policy right now is what is on the.
It just doesn't match exactly. And the reason I bring it up, because I don't know if we should change it or not, but the difference on the other side of it, as far as I can tell, is just that it states employment as school employment in the procedure, but in the policy, it doesn't have that caveat. Is that something that we can adjust so that it isn't just school employment, but all employment?
I will certainly take that under advisement and work with our HR team.
Is that something we can add to our policy to adjust that to, I guess, request that be changed?
I think at this
in the policy here.
That wouldn't be something, because it says put this correctly, you like the wording that's in our policy?
Yes, I like the policy, that it's the procedure that it's, the way it's written, it is written as their employment in schools, not just their employment. So if you've had some sort of sexual misconduct at another employer that is not a school, it doesn't specify that. It just specifies your previous school employment, if that makes sense.
We can always work with our administration
I
as
just
they
remember
adopt,
reading that we, like.
if they adopt it there.
Yeah, I just remember reading, or I guess when I was at the WASDA conference, like they had mentioned that if you want to change a procedure, that you can change your policy to kind of direct that in that way to say, this is what we want to see.
So it sounds like, just to make sure I'm understanding correctly, you already like where our policy is going
Yeah.
on this one. So then we would just work with administration
Okay.
to make sure our policy aligns with our, or the procedures align with our policies
Yeah.
directly as we want. And so, yes, we can always work with our administration for doing that.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Yeah. Any further discussion? Seeing as none, there's a motion and second on the floor for approval of 9.05, second reading and approval of policy 5005, employment disclosures, certification requirements, assurances, and approval. All those in favor, please raise your right hand and say aye.
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 The motion passes 4-0. Is there a motion on the floor?
Move approval of 906, second reading and approval of policy 5010, non-discrimination and affirmative action.
Is there a second?
Second.
A motion has been made and seconded for approval of 9.06, second reading and approval of policy 5010, non-discrimination and affirmative action. We are now open for discussion.
I'm guessing this is just to bring us in line with the, oh, that's weird.
WASDA policy.
It's just the red line says, it like last revised shows December 11th, and then it's fine. I just was confused by it. But yeah, it looks like it's just an update, so.
Correct.
Everything looks good to me.
Seeing that there is no discussion, there is a motion and a second on the floor for approval of item 9.06, second reading and approval of policy 5010, non-discrimination and affirmative action. All those in favor, please raise your right hand and say aye.
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 The motion passes 4-0.
I'm sorry, just a second. I move to approve 9.07, second reading and approval of policy 5011, sex discrimination and sex-based harassment of district staff prohibited.
Is there a second?
Second.
The motion has been made and seconded for approval of item number 9.02, second reading and approval of policy 5011, sex discrimination and sex-based harassment of district staff prohibited. We are now open for discussion.
I assume this is the same as the previous ones, like it's just an update to WASDA policy. Yeah,
Yes.
that makes sense. They added quite a bit. Just,
I believe on this one, sometimes they combine different policies too that
Yeah.
might have existed and align them in the right places.
yeah, it might just be that, because like they added a whole big section in definitions.
That's why we often, for the board, look at WASDA, because they're keeping up with these, combining, doing what needs to do, yeah.
Makes sense.
Seeing that there's no further discussion, there is a motion made and seconded on the floor for approval of item 9.07, second reading and approval of policy 5011, sex discrimination and sex-based harassment of district staff prohibited. All those in favor, please raise your right hand and say aye.
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 The motion passes 4-0.
So on the, sorry, we're going to move on to consent. I'll let you finish.
We are now moving on to item 10.0, the consent agenda. Is there a director who would like to pull an item for discussion?
I just had a question. It's like just one question on one item in the vouchers, but
Which number would you like to pull? 10.09?
yes.
Is there any other items anybody would want pulled? Okay, is there a motion on the floor?
Move approval of consent agenda 1001 to 1011 minus 1009.
Is there a second?
Second.
A motion has been made.
Can I pull 10.11? I just wanted to go over this since it was added late. And I think some people were questioning it.
The information
The new one.
technology?
Yeah. The
It's
network
at
cable.
1011.
Yeah, 1011.
Okay. I'll take that as a friendly amendment.
Okay. There is now a motion on the floor for approval of consent agenda 10.01 through 10.11 minus 10.11 and 10.09. So the whole agenda minus
Second.
09 and .11.
Yeah. Second.
The motion has been made and seconded. Is there we are open for discussion.
One question I had is, and this doesn't really make that much of a difference, but as far as the instructional materials committee, is that something that a board member could join or no?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
They have a policy, there is a policy of what makes up the team.
I don't mean to like give input. I just
No,
mean, I'd
I'm
like to
just-
see like how the sausage is made.
I'm just answering that we don't.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Actually, Madam Chair, why don't we approve
We're just open for discussion right now on the motion that's been made for everything except for 09 and 11.
I have nothing further.
Seeing no further discussion, the motion has been made and seconded for approval of the consent agenda item 10.01 through 10.11 minus 10.09 and 10.11. All those in favor, please raise your right hand and say aye.
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 The motion passes 4-0. Is there a motion on the floor for item 10.09?
I move to approve item 10.09 vouchers.
second.
A motion's been made and seconded. We're now open for discussion.
So on this one, I just noticed that we have a new, at least to me, legal services provider. It looks like Sabrice Busto James. Is that something that's, have we used them in the past? Is this just something that I haven't seen before?
Superintendent Vella?
So the question is there a new legal services provider?
Yeah.
And you named them, can you please repeat that?
Yeah, it's, I may be messing up their name, but it's Sabrice Busto James.
That is not a new one, we've used them before. I believe it's special education, if I'm not mistaken.
I hadn't seen the name before, so I was curious. Thank you. That was my only question.
Move approval of
Seeing,
1009.
seeing that there's no further discussion, we have a motion on the floor for approval of 10.09 vouchers. All those in favor, please raise your right hand and say aye. Aye.
Aye.
The motion passes 4-0. Is there a motion on the floor for 10.11?
I move to approve 10.11 network cabling capacity improvement, Phase 2, bid acceptance and award of contract to cabling and technology services.
Second.
The motion has been made and seconded for item 10.11. We're now open for discussion.
I just was wondering, like, because I took a look at the different bids that we got, and obviously we went with the lowest bid, but the difference between one of them and the other is pretty stark. And I was just wondering if we could get an explanation on that.
Thank you. Mr. Olson?
Esteemed members of the board, Superintendent Vella, Ms. Curry. We believe the reason that one was so high is because, well, that's a good question. We don't exactly know why that one was so high. That particular vendor for Phase 1 also had a bid that was about twice the price of the one that we took. So
I see.
I did call them afterwards and just say, hey, we have Phase 3 coming up, and, is there something going on? And they said, so again, this particular vendor uses a subcontractor.
I see.
And they said that they probably would think about using, that subcontractor. They might do something a little bit different.
I see.
Right, so don't know exactly why, but yeah, they're aware of it.
Have we used them in the past? Like, are they normally like in a normal range?
So I will say that we have not used that particular vendor for a cabling job in this district. I actually used them in a previous district, and they actually won the bid before.
Okay.
So I don't know what the difference is, why.
Yeah.
I will say that their main service is usually not, again, cabling. It's more on the providing switches, access points, more of that type of service.
Would it be beneficial to look at other like contractors that we could use instead? Just like, because I feel like it's like a fake one, right? Like it's not useful if we're not getting something that is even remotely close.
Yeah,
Like,
so again, I had a conversation
Yeah.
with them and just expressed that it would be nice to be able to use them.
Yeah,
And so
yeah.
they said that they would look at ways to make their bid more competitive.
Yeah.
But again, it's an open bid, so anyone can come and give us a bid, and we encourage anyone listening to give us a bid and to come give us a bid. We like good value, right? So
so we didn't have any other bids though, right? It was just these three.
just those three, and then I'll just kind of put a little plug in for today. We had a job walk for phase 3, and we had quite a bit of interest. And
Okay.
so every time that we have people show up to the job walk and not give us a bid, I just call them and say, hey, is there something we could do better so that we'll get a bid next time from you?
Maybe we didn't explain it right, or they didn't.
Whatever it is
whatever
that we
was.
can do better, right? So I had those conversations in the past, and so we have more contractors that walked schools today for
Mhm.
phase 3.
Yeah.
And so that we're looking forward to getting very competitive bids when that comes in January.
That's awesome. Does this have any impact from the recent levy passage?
I would say that it does, in that all of these projects that we're doing is kind of a continuum, right? And it's like we want to be able to get all these projects done. And so as you're planning for intercom systems, right? When we're talking about doing IP-based intercom, it requires a cable drop for that IP endpoint, right? So
Yeah.
being able to do all of the different schools and get all of them cabled is very important in order to be able to complete that goal of the IP intercom system.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, thank you very much for the explanation. I really appreciate it, because looking at this and seeing two bids that are relatively close and then one that's like nearly 3 times as much, I'm like,
Pretty
that's
crazy.
not a really useful bid.
Not at all. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Olson.
Seeing no further questions, there is a motion on the floor for approval of item 10.11, Network Cabling Capacity Improvement Phase 2, bid acceptance and award of contract to Cabling and Technology Services. All those in favor, please raise your right hand and say aye.
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 The motion passes 4-0. We now move on to our informational items. There is a comment from our audience on item 1620P. Do know that the procedure, since the policy did not pass, the procedure would not follow because there is no policy. So still, of course, inviting our community to speak. Valerie Hitch.
Good evening. Yes, thank you for the reminder that the policy did not pass. I'm just going to say this because I plan to say it. So my name is Valerie Hitch. I'm a parent in KSD. And I'm here again just to express continued concern over the creation of policies and procedures, even though it didn't pass tonight, that limit the ability of you to do your job as our elected officials. I still want to make sure that you understand that what was written in the procedures felt absurd to me. Like, it felt like a thinly veiled attempt at censorship. And I feel like rules like this are just wholly unnecessary. So I'd like to remind you that the community elected you to be our representatives. And in that, we want you to support the betterment of KSD. And I know you're doing an unpaid role here. And I want to say I appreciate every moment you spend in our district supporting our kids, going to events, volunteering, and listening to your constituents. And I want you to be involved. I want you to be accessible, and I want you to have the opportunity to form your own unique perspective before you come here to make decisions. So the procedures that were outlined in 1620 would have created additional hoops for you to jump through. And I know I have no time for additional hoops. I bet you don't either. So I hired this board with my vote, and I'd ask that you ask these critical questions of the administration. I hired you to be the collective manager of your one employee, the superintendent. And if my employee wrote rules like this, I don't think they'd be my employee much longer. So I don't know what policy or procedure is going to come up next, but I want to leave you with this old saying: those who have nothing to hide, hide nothing.
President Margell, I'd like Mr. Leonard to come up and address the procedure policy, given that the policy did not pass. Mr. Leonard, related to procedure.
So for clarity of the record, is there a current 1620 policy? So this is not so there's no 1620, is that correct?
So just to put this out there, the current policy of 1620 is about the role of the superintendent only. WASDA came out with advisory language to add the distinction of this policy to be both the board and the superintendent. We had opted, just like all the other policies that we passed tonight, to follow WASDA language and keep that, along with the procedure being identical to the WASDA vetted procedure that went along with the policy that we had moved on to the reading tonight. And so this procedure was written by WASDA, was accepted verbatim, and went through the entire WASDA group for doing this. But yes, the big difference is both the board and superintendent is listed in this one. So what will continue on is the current policy 1620 in its form of about the superintendent and the corresponding 1620P.
Yeah, I just wanted clarity for the record that, as a reminder, action by the board is not required on procedure. But given that this new procedure and policy does represent a change, now I understand it aligns with WASDA, it would make sense to hold on the procedure until the change in the policy is made. Again, that would, if that does happen, it would come to the board as informational. In the future, you would not vote on it. But given that the change is enough, at least a little change in focus, I understand it's aligned with WASDA. It makes sense to wait on the procedure.
Correct.
And there was no procedure before for it though, right? Like even though it changed from the superintendent or whatever that it said before, and that it changed the policy regarding that. There was no 1620P before though, right?
There was not.
Correct.
Okay. That's my understanding of it. Wow. Yes.
I will state that, and I'm just pulling up WASDA's recommendations because I have them here, that although the Kent School District did not have a 1620P, WASDA did previously have procedures associated with this. They just were not adopted by this board.
Oh, okay. I can't see their previous ones, I don't think.
For clarity of the record, the previous recommendation from WASDA 1620P was from December of 2011.
Okay. Is there a place? I'll ask you after. It's fine.
Okay, moving on to our final communication has, we had all of them taken care of in our preliminary. So we are now moving on to 1202, board reports and discussion. Director Song.
Hello. Yeah, I guess for my concluding board report, I just want to say thank you for everybody who was in attendance at today's public meeting. And then again, do apologize for being distanced for this week, but I will be back in person after winter break. So I look forward to hearing more from our students and community then. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Song. Director Clark?
I was fortunate enough to be able to, I'm sorry.
Nope.
I was fortunate enough to go along with the superintendent to visit Park Orchard Elementary and Emerald Park Elementary. And visiting those schools just, again, reminds me of the wonderful strength and talent among our teaching professions in those buildings. They have a really wide variety of students with a wide variety of needs. And they clearly cooperate with the principal to build a program that keeps kids involved and makes them feel like they're included. They're part of what's going on in the building. And thank you.
Thank you, Director Clark. Vice President Cook?
So I wrote a little bit of a speech just because it's the closing of a year for myself at least. And so first I want to thank my fellow board members for their confidence in me by voting for me to assume the role of Vice President of the board here at the Kent School District. I hoped I am able to both make you proud and show that I am worthy of the position. My sincerest thanks go to my fellow board members for their trust in my ability to do the work needed here. I recently left my job working at Comcast after having worked there for over 18 years. I have found my work here in the Kent School District to be incredibly fulfilling, and I feel that the work I am doing here is absolutely necessary, and I no longer felt that I could do both jobs to the extent I believe necessary for me to give my best effort to both. For these reasons, I chose to focus my efforts on my work as a board director here in KSD. In choosing to move on from my 25-year-plus career in IT, I am excited to say that I have chosen to start volunteering in the school districts around surrounding Kent, as well as working at them. So far, I have begun substitute teaching in both the Renton School District and the Auburn School District. I plan on supporting these and other districts as a substitute teacher, as well as any other position I am qualified to work in. I plan to use the knowledge and skills I gain while doing this work to help make better decisions and to share my findings with my fellow board members and district administration. I look forward to an exciting and challenging school year supporting KSD and the surrounding districts in South King County. This past year has been challenging, exciting, and so very rewarding for me. I am happy to have been given the opportunity to serve once again. I don't expect smooth sailing for the next 3 years, but I will continue to do my best to support our students, staff, and this wonderful community to the best of my ability for as long as my community wishes me to be their voice in this space. Finally, I would like to give thanks to the staff and community of KSD around me for all of your support in the multitude of ways you have so far. The work is never done, and I hope the rest of this school year is an incredible success in every way possible. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vice President Cook. I would like to thank our Kent Schools Foundation for the very generous donations that we had. Your work is appreciated and makes a big difference in our schools, in our community. I would like to thank Kent Ridge High School for their presentation, and thank you very much for educating us on the Panorama project. And I look forward to hearing more of those results from all of our secondary schools. Speaking of Kent Ridge, I had the opportunity to view our 22 state-winning chatelaines at their fall showcase this last weekend. The hard work in seeing the team well, I haven't seen all 56 years, but I would say at least the last 30 of them has been rewarding, and just every year they continue to shine and really show the dedication and the legacy that goes with that program. I've also had numerous opportunities to watch some middle school basketball, and my takeaway from that is the sportsmanship and seeing this from all of our different middle schools, whether a shot is made, whiffed, whatever that is, it's fun to see the camaraderie of, hey, you'll get the next one, the pat on the shoulder, and the cheering for both sides of the court from the students and the parents. I also thank our community for the partnerships that they give our students. Being part of the community, it gives those bridges between what are you doing today in high school and what are you moving to. I had the opportunity to see the Kent Ridge Choir in collaboration with Wellspring, a community organization, this Sunday performing, and just a great experience of kind of wishing in the holidays, and then also just showing what can happen after high school, both careers, but also for enjoyment. I know this was mentioned in the superintendent report, but say it again. Thank you to our environmental, our maintenance, our IT, school administration. I'd also like to add in there the district administration for the leadership and all that went into the cleanup after the storm. We know that that is a lot of work, and it's not always at the hours that we want them to, let's say 2 a.m., 3 a.m. But as a parent, I am so thankful that the communication came out so timely, and thank you for always putting our students first and their safety. Thank you again for the opportunity to be able to go to WASDA. A lot was learned there, and that will continue on as I serve the community in this role. Thank you for the opportunity from my board members to continue on as the president. I will say that this is a labor of love, and I very much do think it is good, worthy work. We have also had policy sessions, budget session today, work session, and then our AI, which was joined with faculty and students alike, and all very informative sessions. And thank you to the board members that were able to prioritize attendance of those ones. It really does inform us in our ability to best do the work that we are up here on the dais asked to do. I always want to end with thanking our students. You are the reason that we are here every day, and may we always make sure that it is students that we are focused on first and what we are talking about most. It is 8:32, and we are adjourned.